In this video, I am going to do number 5 on page 242. So number 5 says that a country's labor force is the sum of the number of the employed and unemployed workers. And so I think that's useful to actually write out. So the labor force is a sum of unemployed and employed workers. And they want you to, so part A asks you to calculate the number of workers employed in each of the regions in April 2013 and 2014. So the first thing is I'm going to start with the Northeast. Okay, and in order to figure out what the number of employed is in April 2013, I'm going to need to do a little bit of calculation because what I have is the labor force in 2013 and the number of unemployed in 2013. So what I'm really going to need to do to get the number of employed workers, I'm going to need to subtract. So I'm going to need to take the number of unemployed workers from the number in the labor force, and that's going to give me the number of employed. So for April 2013 in the Northeast, I'm going to take 28,407.2 and I'm going to subtract 2,174.4. And if I just try to move that box out of the way, okay, so here I am, just do it manually. Okay, so I have about 26,232.8 employed workers in the Northeast in April 2013. Let's consider April 2014 in the Northeast. Again, I'm going to subtract unemployed from the labor force to get the number of employed workers. So looking over at the chart, if I take the labor force, I have 28,288.9 and I have the number of employed workers is 1,781.3. So 26,507.6 employed workers. In part C, you're just asked to, in the second part of part A, you're just asked to calculate the change in the total number of workers employed between April 2013 and April 2014. So all I really need to do is just simple subtraction here. I just really need to just subtract these two numbers. So I need to take 26,507.6 and subtract 26,232.8. In part B, I'm simply asked to calculate the growth in the labor force from April 2013 to 2014. I'm going to do each one of these problems just for the region of the Northeast. So considering the Northeast, all I really need to do is take the labor force in April 2014. So this is the Northeast. And we have April 2014, and we're looking at the labor force. So in April 2014, we have 28,288.9 in the labor force. And then in April 2013, we have 28,407.2. And so all I really need to do is subtract these numbers. I just need to subtract 28,407.2 minus 28,288.9. Okay, so really quickly, that'll give us, should have just put this in the calculator, and this was a 3. So I have 118.3. That's the difference. It did not tell me to calculate the growth rate, so I'm fine just leaving it in as a number. In part C, I'm asked to calculate the unemployment rate in the different regions of the country in April 2013 and April 2014. So as an example, I will calculate the unemployment rate in the Northeast in April 2013. So I know that the unemployment rate is equal to the number of unemployed as a percentage of the entire labor force. And to get this as a decimal, I'm going to multiply this fraction here by 100. So looking over at the numbers in the Northeast in April 2013, I have that the number of unemployed is 2,174.4. The number in the labor force is 28,407.2. And I'm going to take this fraction and multiply by 100. And if I do that, so I'm going to divide 2,174.4 divided by 28,407.2, and I'm going to multiply it by 100. Whoa, wait a second there. Hold on, let's try this again. 2,174.4 divided by 28.2. Enter, and I'm going to get about 7.7, so just for a good measure. Okay, so this is going to give me about 7.7% is the unemployment rate in April 2013 in the Northeast. So in part D, I'll just give you a little bit of intuition of what's going on because the written solutions are up on Blackboard, but just to give you a sense of what this question is asking. The unemployment rate is equal to the number of unemployed people over the entire labor force. Okay, and we know we multiply by 100. Okay, but let's focus on this formula here. This formula tells me I'm looking at the percentage of unemployed compared to the labor force, so the number of unemployed as a percentage of the labor force. Well, let's consider this number. Let's consider how it moves together, okay? Let's pretend that the unemployment rate, and let's just keep it as a fraction for illustrative purposes. So let's say that the unemployment rate is 1/5. And I want to make this unemployment rate larger. If I want to make this unemployment rate larger, I can do it in one of two ways. I can either focus on the number of unemployed, or I can focus on the labor force. If I want to make the unemployment rate larger by focusing on the number of unemployed, I could simply say, okay, let's make this a 2 instead of a 1. And I know 1/5 is less than 2/5. So that's how I'm going to make it larger if I want to affect the unemployment, the number of unemployed. But if I want to make this number larger, I can also do it by affecting the denominator. So I can also say, okay, let me keep the number of unemployed 1, but let me make the labor force 4. Okay, so now I've also made the unemployment rate larger by just increasing or decreasing the denominator. And I know 1/5 is less than 1/4. And so this is the way that I've increased it by way of affecting the labor force. So the idea here and the idea behind Part D is that when the unemployment rate moves in the United States, we're not always sure whether it's moved because the number of unemployed people has actually increased, or if it's because there have been changes to the number of people in the labor force. So if the number in the labor force, for instance, if more people drop out of the labor force, then the unemployment rate will get smaller even if nothing has happened to the number of people who are unemployed. So, for instance, let's go back to this number 1/5. Let's think about my wanting to make this number smaller. I can make this number smaller by increasing the denominator. I can keep the number of unemployed 1, and I can make the denominator 6 instead of 5. And 1/6 is smaller than 1/5. And so here, if the idea is in relating this to reality, that if more people drop out if more people are added to the labor force, if they are entering the labor force at a greater rate, then the unemployment rate is going to go down, even though there has been no change to the number of unemployed people. And so that's the idea. So in this question, part D, you would have had to look at the trends between the labor force and the number of unemployed, and try to determine whether changes in the unemployment rate is as a result of changes in the number of unemployed people or in the number of people in the labor force.